Hi there. Hey guys. It's me again, Sarah Stephenson, your co-host for Boys and Ghouls Film Review. And with me now is my co-host, Mike Stephenson.
Hi all, how are you? And how are you there, Sarah? Good?
Very good.
Cool. Now, before we go too far, I'm going to introduce this one today. We're doing The Company of Wolves. It's a 1984 gothic fantasy horror. That's what the genre is listed as. It's not really a horror in the eyes of the director, but it's been deemed to be a horror in merchandising the movie, I suppose. So, yeah, there's horror themes to it. There's a bit of a gore and stuff, and not vampires, werewolves and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is, to me, it's a gothic fantasy horror.
Last time we were doing a review on the Snow White and the Tale of Terror. Well, this one is another coming of age type story.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
A little bit attached to it when you think about it. So this is no different than our other podcast fantasy films we discussed. But it has a little bit more information about it.
And it's a little bit more horror. Whereas we did Labyrinth 3, so that was more fantasy. There wasn't any horror in that. This is getting a bit darker.
Yeah, a lot darker and a little bit more symbolic.
Yeah, there's a few things there we want to discuss, isn't that right?
Quite right.
Now, just before we go any further, this was actually. Story was done by an Angela Carter. It's a very, 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 very short story.
Yes, it came from the novel called The Bloody Chamber.
And that's not swearing. That's what it's called. Yeah, the bloody thing. That's
and
part of
the
name.
Stories are spin-offs of fairy tale stories in general.
And this one in particular is a bit of a spin-off of good old Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf, but not in any way you've ever seen or dreamt of her before. By the way, Neil Jordan and Angela Carter, the original writer of the story, collaborated on the screenplay, and Neil Jordan was also the director of this movie, and I believe he might have been the producer. Was he the producer as well? I can't remember. No, he wasn't the producer of this one. No, somebody else. Yeah, somebody else. But yeah, directed. He wrote the story, so he had a good feel for it, I think.
Yes. So do you want to start talking about the summary of the story?
A quick overview. The film was based on whatever story was you mentioned before. I think it was actually based on The Company of Wolves. Was that the story name?
Yes, that's The Company of Wolves.
And they used the same name for the movie, and that was, like Sarah said, a bit more of a coming of age. Now, the original story was written about 1979, which is about 5 years before the movie was made. Now, like I said, it's loosely based on Red Riding Hood. There's lots of good groovy things to it. It's actually done. I wouldn't say it's on a limited budget. It was a nice, tidy budget. It didn't make a lot at the box office, but some of these type of movies don't make it because of the nature of the movie. Not everybody likes fantasy, but I think it's a good movie, and that's one reason why Sarah and I are reviewing it today.
Quite right.
Carry on, Sarah.
So, should we begin the summary of the actual film?
Well, you can go into that, and I'll roll into it with you.
Yeah. So the story begins with our heroine with her parents. Her parents are coming home from the shops or whatever, and
wait, it's now time because a lot of this is in dream sequence.
Yeah, in this sequence, it takes place in probably 1987 or whatever. Now time.
Yeah.
For considering that this is back in the 80s, so they're. Now time is around the 80s. So the kids' parents come home in their house to the country house, and their oldest daughter Alice is
her older sister.
Yeah, is interpreted that her younger sister is having tummy bug or tummy ache.
Or whatever, wouldn't come out of the room. She's in bed having a sleep. What we don't know exactly really, but she was just in bed having a sleep. How's that?
Yeah. So, in the end, there was a bit of a conversation between the parents saying that her dad was remarking that her daughter's a little frustrated and can't really explain it to her dad in details what's wrong.
Yeah. Now, I will say something right now. I think the character Rosaleen was supposed to be about 15, 16, but the actress playing the part Sarah Patterson, was about 13 or 14 at the time, but I think she carried the role pretty good for someone that young. Yeah.
Yeah, so we continue on. The older sister goes up to her sister's room. That's it's her room is pretty much pretty much full of little kids' toys and porcelain dolls, everything you may consider childish related stuff.
Yeah, pre-adult stuff. Yeah. So there's some dolls and teddies still hanging around.
A lot like Sarah's room from the labyrinth I mentioned earlier.
Very much. Yeah.
And in this one, as I said in detail last time, I think that Rosalie is a confused little girl when I think about it. Like she's having trouble trying to adapt to being getting to the next level of things.
Yeah, because she would I'm not being gross really. She would have been changing when she's about 12-ish, into becoming a woman. I won't go into graphic details. And her body would have been changing, and the chemistry in the body was changing, and other things. And and that would probably be the right time girls' minds would start changing. Would you say?
I would say that. I mean, while a lot of kids are probably looking forward to the next level of adapting, she's probably not
fighting it a bit.
Is fighting this very thing that comes to mind.
She loves her fantasy world a bit. I think, anyway.
Well, she just likes being a kid, running around, playing hide and seek, doing all the kid stuff you consider maybe either boring now, but back then it's a lot more fun.
A simple life.
It's just simple, and you don't really have to worry about big problems.
No, adult problems. Now, kid problems, what's for dinner? Adult problems, a lot deeper.
So, she's in her room. She's sleeping, and then we dive into her fantasy world. She's dreaming about mostly,
which is the late 18th century. A bit, and so that's where the gothic horror fantasy comes into it.
Yeah. So her sister in the fantasy world is brutally killed by these wolves, supposedly.
Very nice wolves. They're really pretty.
Yeah.
They weren't all wolves, really. But they're actors. Or dogs.
So her sister was killed, and her family is grieving, and she's told by her parents to go spend some quality time with her grandma, who is, as it turns out, is...
For you people who, not really young people, but Angela Lansbury has been around for a long time, and she's getting a bit old here in this movie, but she played a good grandma in this. I wouldn't say a sinister grandma, but a little bit creepy in some ways, because she's strange.
Yeah, she's a little weird, this grandma.
Weird? Makes me look good.
She kind of, when they're walking walking back to her cottage in the woods, about telling her that not to stray from the path.
Yeah, now we think together, we put our heads together on this, didn't we? We think that was a hint about staying true and virtuous or something rather, and don't do anything naughty. That's what we feel, because that came in once or twice during the movie. Yeah,
and every time Rosalie kind of steps off the path, it's encountering things that she finds either desirable or, needing.
Yeah.
Like in this first bit, she sees some lovely red raspberries, and her grandma scolds her for this because she says to step outside off the path means entering forbidden desires.
Yeah, forbidden territory, desires, whatever, yeah. So stay in the path and you can't go wrong. Go off the path, you could have a problem.
Yeah.
So, interesting. So, I think there's an analogy in there about that sort of
there's
thing.
a lot of, you'll find a lot of analogies in this movie throughout. I know that when I first seen it, I was trying to work out what's this story about. I know she's dreaming and stuff is fairy tales, but why is everyone telling her not to do something that seems either not really considered bad?
Well, you think about it. We reviewed another movie recently. It hasn't been released yet. Snow White, not been released yet? The other podcast? No. No. Well, we did one recently, which is going to come out probably later, well, before this one maybe, who knows, and had the same thing. There's wolves involved, and back in those days, wolves would have been a lot more prevalent in those European countries, and they were a serious danger. And probably that's what the underlying theme of the story. Yeah, be careful, the wolves go into the bushes because you're going to find wolves in there and other creepy creatures. Your life could be at risk. I think that was what they're trying to say.
Yes. So this is not only a little bit symbolism, but there throughout the this movie, her grandma or herself tells some interesting stories that talk about meeting strange men who transform into wolves. A little bit of lichen, storyline there. So the first story was mostly about a woman who married a man she barely knows, and they spend the night in their getting on their wedding night.
The wedding night. They were getting ready to do the deed, but he went for a walk outside. Probably because it was a full moon. You think?
Yes, we did see a full moon in the background, and he says he was going to go outside to
let nature. He had something to do with nature. Nature, I think it's called. Well, he had to go for a whiz, that's what he implied. Nature's calling, you see. And so he went outside. So he thought he'd be back in about 5 minutes.
Yes.
So she waited.
And waited.
And then she waited a bit longer. And she got curious and went to the window. What did she see?
Some wolves.
And needless to say, for some reason, hubby didn't come back to the wedding bed.
Yeah, and the next morning, some hunters are around trying to find him, but they find that he's gone.
And they threatened to run away because he didn't want to be married to her. And now, come on, he wasn't that ugly, honestly.
Yeah, and then probably after a while, month, maybe a week or a year.
Well, a couple of months probably. She met somebody else.
She met someone else and
got married.
And they had a few kitties.
And then her original
husband comes around.
And we get the impression, we get to know he was a werewolf. And he came in there and he was starting to terrorise her, and the new husband came there
and lopped his head off.
Real quick. He didn't even notice her husband had walked in the room with the axe. He wasn't a very good werewolf, was he?
Yeah, and so the story, the one bit that kind of makes me think of it is when the wolf's head comes off and the wolf's head turns back into the man's original appearance.
The way he used to look 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, and the girl and the lady wept over the poor man's decapitated head.
And the new husband was a little bit annoyed. I just saved you from this monstrous creature and you're crying over the creature. I don't think you can understand that one, and I can't either.
Well, I think it's the way she worded it. She says, he looks like she said
the day of,
the day of my wedding, and he just gives her a very hard slap.
Yeah, okay, that cheek. Would not be acceptable in today's movies. That is not politically correct.
And Rosaleen just says she would never let a man strike her.
No, she's a nice, strong-willed little girl, isn't she?
Yeah, she even questioned, would wolves ever beat their own mates after they had their way with them?
And wolves are very nice. They're very faithful to each other,
like
human beings. Well, hopefully.
And her grandma says that we're all animals, or men are animals. Maybe
that's a bit rude.
I don't know if she meant just the wolves may be animals, or just men are animals.
I think she alluded to men being a bit of animal in all this. And,
there is.
Be careful of strange men, etc., etc., etc. So, because obviously she was trying to protect her young. Granddaughter. Virtue, I suppose. So be careful, strange men, because he was young and naive and innocent and whatever. Yeah, but if you see a stranger, don't trust him because he could impose his upon her. Yeah.
Yes, quite.
Yeah.
So, most of these stories, like this one, kind of get Rosalie a little confused and a little bit shy about men, and can't work out whether they're good guys or just hiding something from
that's it.
From
I think
women.
Didn't the grandmother say if men are furry on the or hairy on the outside, but you got to look out for the ones that are hairy on the inside.
Yeah,
that's an interesting expression, isn't it?
Yeah, she also says that the ones who look like they might be werewolves are the ones with that show their eyebrows
joined
being
in the middle. Now I've met a lot of Greeks like that. Does that mean all Greeks are werewolves?
No, I don't think so. But it's an interesting summary of not to trust. Well, not to. It's not really a good description of a werewolf. I mean,
Of course not.
I don't really like. I like most guys out there, and some of them can be considered best friends or brothers in my case. And I like the look of them as older brothers.
I know how to tell a werewolf. If he's a flea collar on, he's a werewolf.
Yes.
Like, okay.
Yes.
Okay. They get fleas.
So our story continues on. Rosalie gets advice from her parents and a bit of. She even sees them making love in one scene. And that she begins to question whether or not her parents ever hurt each other while they're doing it, or
Well, she's probably thinking about it. Nothing actually said, but yeah. So they had this very, very small cottage. There wasn't a lot of privacy.
yeah, it's one of those small ones like that could really be the size of your kitchen.
Yeah, they lived slept in the same area. So
Meaning you can bathe there, probably cooked a good meal there, and just sleep in the same hovel together.
Well, look, you think about housewives in those days had it easy. You got one room to clean, a very small room, and that was the kitchen. You did the kitchen, tidy up the bed, everything. It's all done in about half an hour.
Yeah, quite. Yes. So Rosalie, after her grandma begins to make a red cloak, hood, cloak and hood.
Cloak for hood, yeah. Gee, I wonder what that's all about.
Yes, and it kind of, thanks to the cloak, I think it kind of causes a little stir around the village, like especially with one of the boys in the village who has a bit of a crush on her.
Yeah, he's coming of age too.
Yes, and he's not really great looking.
He's an average looking little country guy. But he's very immature as well, and since he's immature, and it's like, let's play doctors almost, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there was a scene where he invites her into the woods just to
take a little walk.
Take a
He
bit
wants
of
to
a
steal
walk.
a kiss. Yeah.
Yes, just to take a little bit of a walk around, and while things are good, but at the time she's kind of a little nervous around him, like a little afraid that he'll wanna take advantage of her.
Yeah, but honestly, I think the problem was. He didn't get a juices flowing.
Yes,
I think that was the problem.
Back to the stories. In one of the stories, another story, it talks about a boy meeting the devil in the woods.
The next story that the grandma told. Yeah.
Yes, in this story, the boy meets the devil and he gives him an ointment that gives him sprout hair on his chest, or anywhere else. When I think about it.
Well, problem is though, what did they do to him? We didn't see the whole lot of the transformation, but we do believe he turned into a werewolf. But at the same time, those vines came up and strangled him.
Or wrap around his legs.
Or something going, okay.
A lot like the Evil Dead if you've seen the movie.
Yeah, and I was wondering what the symbolism. Okay, you're turning into a werewolf, but the plant material around you decides to tie you up and everything, so you can't do anything. And you go, right.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing, that scene, but it does sprout a lot of thought.
Granny does tell some strange stories, yeah.
Yeah, and the next story after that one is told by Rosalie after. Well, I won't get into that one just yet, but after Rosalie kind of escapes the boy that was attempting to kiss her in the woods, she comes across a tree and hides up there. And while she's there, she kind of comes across a nest, and these eggs inside it begin to hatch.
And little figurines of babies or something.
Yeah, they were very cute.
Interesting, that one.
Yeah, it got me thinking a lot, that scene. Yes, and the boy soon discovers a dead cow that was presumably killed by a wolf.
Yeah, and then they got the villagers went out there looking for the culprit, and they tracked down what they believed to be the right wolf.
Yeah, little did we know, when Rosalie was going back to the village, she encounters the wolf, but doesn't even so much as stir and notice it. And I don't know if it's the same wolf that got killed by the villagers either.
I think it was. I reckon.
Let's just continue where we left.
I reckon it was a different wolf. That's all.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
there are a lot of wolves in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
quite right.
I think it's a friend of the other wolf.
Yeah. So we get back to the next story that Rosalie talks about. This one is about a man who was
rich guy,
a rich, wealthy guy who takes advantage of a woman in the village. and she was so angry at him that she came to his wedding.
Oh, by the way, she was heavily pregnant.
Yes, meaning she's the other woman, or
she was heavy with child.
yes, and she wanted to get even with him.
So she came to the wedding reception.
Yes, and she's not like your ordinary woman. She turns out to be either a witch or a sorceress.
Nah, I think they said she was a witch or something.
Yes,
yeah.
so she casts a spell, and all the guests at the wedding, including him, turn into wolves.
Yeah, and they went and ran off into the forest.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're going to turn into werewolves in this because it doesn't imply it.
I think she just turned. She said in a comment that the wolves in the forest have got better manners than they have, so she turned them into wolves to teach them a lesson. But there's also a penalty. They had to serenade her and her child every night. That's why the wolves howl at night. I always wondered.
Yeah, and she didn't harm the servants, just so you know.
No, actually, they bowed to her and clapped her, and they were really happy that she got rid of these
wealthy aristocrats.
I don't think the servants like the people very much.
No servants probably don't usually despise their employees. Maybe.
Well, not always.
Well, maybe not all of them, but we don't know what the relationship between employees and the aristocrats.
Yeah.
I mean, the
pay disputes, that sort of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the employees and the aristocrats probably didn't have a very warm relationship. Maybe some of them don't.
Nah. Actually, didn't they pop a bottle of champagne after after the enchantment was done, the guests ran away as wolves.
Yeah.
And they bowed to the witch, like saying thank you, and they popped the bottle of champagne, and they were going to have a couple of drink to celebrate. So you can't get Starfleet more, can you?
But it was hilarious watching them pour out the champagne.
Yeah,
and meaning that at least that something good of this this spell did.
Yeah.
And I did feel sorry. I feel not really sorry for the aristocrats who have to howl and probably plead for the witch to turn them back into humans. Right then?
Exactly.
So, we're moving on to the...
Can we say the fourth one? Because that's relevant to when, near the end of the story, I think.
I know, I just
when she's with, who after blah, and she tells...
Yeah, I just want to bring up one other scene in this movie that really captures my eye a lot. When the father returns after they killed suspected wolf.
Oh, yeah.
He comes back with a severed paw of the very creature they killed as a trophy.
Remember, they killed a wolf and he cut the front paw off.
Yes.
Paw, P-A-W.
Yes, and when he produced it and showed it to his wife and his kid, it was a human hand with a signet ring on which finger is that one?
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah, he's
one of his
fingers. His smallest finger, or second smallest finger. But he said it was a wolf when I cut it off, and now it turned into a man's hand. Yeah. So they started saying, "Oh, evil, werewolf," sort of.
Yeah. They failed to, or they're still confused by the whole scenario.
I don't think they're confused. They probably would have known about werewolves and the myths behind them and stuff. That's why it's a beware of men. Remember the hairy ones on the inside. So I think they're wary of werewolves.
Yeah, but they.
But maybe not everyone believed in them.
No, I don't think they all believed it. They were confused by it. And however, they threw
it. It was handy he threw it away, wasn't it?
Yeah, so he threw into the fire, and Rosalee is, the one that's sleeping in the bed is softly crying with the man's hand that got burnt. Yeah. I don't know if she was really crying or just maybe she feels pity for the creature.
Who knows? But the plot thickens after that. What happens after that, Sarah? You seem to be have it all memorised.
Well, in the next scene, she travels again to her grandma's house, and this is going to stick to the original story you probably read about as a kid, maybe.
Yes, this now it gets exciting, kiddies.
Yeah, so it sort of fits in with the original story a little bit, not too much.
A little bit.
And the Blood Chamber book, if you read it.
Now, okay, once upon a time, she's walking through the woods, man. Come on.
So she goes into the woods.
She's a basket of goodies.
Yeah, and she's taken along as a weapon a knife, just in case she confronts any more wolves. And she's as she's walking, she encounters a handsome gentleman in a nice suit.
He said he lost his horse, he's lost his way.
And he lost his female companion.
And his friends, his companions, yeah. He's lying.
Yeah, so he suggests that they have a short picnic down near the near a spot he knows. So they go off together, and he and her start hanging out together for a bit.
And then he says, I got a compass here, and I can find the way to your grandma's house fast and you by cutting through the forest. So they had a race, didn't they?
Yes, and before that, she didn't believe him about the compass, and she really talks about the hairy wolves on the inside sort of stuff, and he's a little. I think he was
a little bit annoyed.
A little annoyed, and at the same time, a little bit a little surprised that she knows all this.
A wise granny.
Yes, and he, as they were discussing the bet, he says if he wins, he gets a kiss from her, from Rosalee, and she gets either his compass or whatever she desires. It's not implied that she wants the compass, but maybe she wants something more.
Maybe not.
Yes.
You're rude.
Yeah.
No,
well.
But anyway, they have a race.
Yes, and he gets there first.
Just like in the fairy tale one.
And he mimics or pretends to be Rosalee by talking in her voice.
And he gets inside the house to see Granny. And Granny twigs straight away that it's not Rosalee.
Yes,
it's a man.
Yes,
it's a very astute observation.
Yes, and she freaks out, and after a little brief fight scene, not so long scene, just a few minutes, he swipes his hand and crashes her head against the wall, and it almost looks like a porcelain doll head, and it looks partly inside. It looks like a coconut. Don't ask me, but it looks like it.
Would have been white porcelain. It would have been empty. So that would have been like being a fantasy because he was dreaming this. It wouldn't be a real head. Yeah.
Yes. So Rosalie soon arrives and sees him there, and he says that her granny is outside collecting firewood.
She's not. She is firewood. No.
Yes. Yeah, but then she finds out the truth, and they
have a little battle.
They have a little bit of a scuffle.
And?
Yeah, and she says the same lines you may have heard in the book, like, what big eyes you have. And he says, what
big muscles you have. And all those other things like that. Anyway.
Yes. And by the time she then realizes that, he won the bet, so technically he's owed what he's wants.
And they kiss and says, "Why? What big teeth you've got!" Oh, gee.
Yes, and before he could even move, she shoots him in the shoulder.
Yeah, with his own gun.
And he starts transforming right in front of her.
And then she feels it turns into a nice little wolf. What a beautiful wolf he was too.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, he feels sorry for him, doesn't she?
Yeah, and she tells him one last story for the road.
Which you're going to tell now.
Yes, and this story is about of a she-wolf, a female wolf, just so you know what I'm talking about.
One is stuck out of a well in the middle of a village.
Yeah, and one of the villagers shoots at it, and the wounds her, and she runs throughout the forest until she comes to a church.
Yeah.
And she's kind of
a kindly priest.
And a kind priest comes out and sees her. She's now transformed back into a human, or a scruffy old human.
Naked.
Yes.
No clothes.
There's a bit of nudity in this movie, so be aware. This is not for children.
The priest might have been praying for one of these. I don't know, but yeah.
Yes, so the priest approaches her really slowly, thinking, was she God's creation or the devil's creation? But he kind of felt sorry for her, so he bandaged her wound and softly comforted her while she cried.
And then, but the next scene, she's going back to the well, and she goes back down to where she came from.
Yes, and that
sad.
And I'm not sure how long this takes place, but probably the next morning, because soon enough the rest of the villagers, including her mum and dad, are coming to the granny's house. And
because Rosalie didn't come home.
Yes, so they're going for the forest, trying to find her, and getting to the grandma's house. And once they arrive at the grandma's house, what came out the window?
The boy wolf.
The male wolf
Yeah,
jumping out of the window.
Jumped out and they tried to shoot. Did they try to shoot at him?
No, they didn't. They missed him, or didn't bother.
And then they went inside Granny's house.
Yes, and they see right there on the near the fireplace a beautiful wolf
wearing
a crucifix,
which Rosalee had been wearing
all throughout this movie.
Yes. So Mummy was her mother was the first one
to notice this.
She's the first one who opened the door, and she saw it and realised that wolf was her daughter.
Yeah, and
she tried to warn everybody, don't shoot her, don't shoot her.
Yeah, at first everyone starts freaking out, and of course Rosalee and the male wolf went off into the woods, and this is where the story gets really weird.
Yeah.
So somehow all the Rosalee's dream is appearing in her reality a little bit.
We think she's having a dream within a dream part here, because these wolves who are running for a forest come to her house in the modern day, and they come through the front door, and the place looks like it's been deserted. Like there's leaves on the floor, and there's vines.
Yeah, like a lot of it's been.
So we think it's a dream for the dream.
Yeah. So the wolves start climbing up the stairs and into the mansion, and then and clawing at her door very menacingly. And of course, Rosalee wakes up. Or not
for the first dream part.
For this dream part.
Yeah.
And she sees the wolves climbing through her window. She's screaming really loud.
And that wolf knocks over some of her toys, which end up on the floor.
Yeah, crashing, breaking, a few bit of glass here and there.
And we believe that was probably, in her dream, her part of her coming of age things, like her childish things are being pushed aside.
And she's gonna...
Yeah, and she's verging on becoming a woman. Yeah. Which might have been 15, 16 back in those days.
Yeah, so you probably now give me the confused looks now. So I'll sit down and explain to you guys a bit of a cliff notes of what I've learned from this movie.
Some of the symbolism and stuff, is it?
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
Goody, I'll sit back and have a listen too.
Yeah, like the wolves, for instance, they symbolize the loss of innocence and male desires and evil deeds. So that kind of fits in why everyone's telling her to beware of the wolves and beware of the woods.
Probably.
And the path we discussed was mostly about making sure you're keeping your virginity intact.
That sounds about it.
And it talks about womanhood, where near the end she becomes a wolf. That bit where Rosalee, you see,
and she partners with the boy wolf.
Yes, and this where she even though we don't see it in the movie, but she sheds her skin and becomes a full woman, meaning
full wolf.
Which means that the wolf that she's become is the full woman she's becoming.
Yeah, so there's a lot of symbolism in there.
Yes, and to the end, the second dream we're talking about now. This one.
When the boy wolf was shot and everything, she told him the story. Okay.
No, I mean I'm talking about the ending, the extended bit where she wakes in reality and all that stuff. In this ending, Rosalee accepts becoming a full woman in her dreams, but in the cold light of day, when she's waking up, she has to face it head on, which means makes it even more terrifying because this means she has to enter puberty, a monthly cycle, periods, which is which kind of fits in with the lichen, full moon thing when you think about it.
Yeah, 28-day cycle.
Yes, and
you're stretching it a bit here, but it works.
Yeah, and finally she has to face up to adulthood, meaning shedding her skin and moving on to the next level.
Well, shedding a human skin became a wolf, shedding a baby skin, becoming an adult, losing your baby teeth, getting adult teeth, all sort of fits in. Now, let's get into nitty-gritty.
Yes, let's get that to nitty-gritty.
Now, the filming. Where was it filmed, remember?
Somewhere in London studios.
Hang on, I'll have a quick look at my notes, see if I've got anything written down. Hang on. Russell.
Yeah.
No, I didn't take any notes about where it was filmed on this one. However, there was the bits in the forest they said they couldn't get a forest because of the budget, and they actually used about 12 trees and some bush around it to do a lot of the bush shots.
Yeah.
That was very, very good angling and perspective stuff to make that actually work. It looked like they're in a gloomy, horrible forest.
Yeah, just so you guys know, there is a lot of weird stuff in the forest scenes. Like, there's like giant mushrooms the size of
Not magic
a table.
mushrooms, folks, just ordinary ones.
Yeah, and a lot of weird stuff like there's a lot of leaves that are covered with glitter, like something weird. A lot of weird animals like snakes and cute white rabbits.
Yeah, they're a bit like Alice in Wonderland. Hey.
Yeah, I often think snakes symbolize maybe the first deadly sin,
Adam and Eve sort of stuff? Maybe?
Yeah, like
maybe, who knows?
Like giving into sexual desires or something like that.
Well, you think about Adam and Eve, right? Adam is a nice, virtuous man. He comes along, she's pretty nice, and she tempts Adam, and he has a bite of the apple. And then God comes along and says, well, who did this? And he says, Adam, what do you do? And he says, well, don't blame me. She made me do it. And he said, looked at Eve, says, Eve, what did you do? He says, well, don't blame me. The snake made me do it. He looked at the snake, and the snake didn't have the leg to stand on. I thought I'd just throw that one in.
Yeah, for good measure. So, as we're saying, there is some other stuff there that indicates that the wolves have been targeting Rosalie the moment she stepped foot in the forest. Like, you could tell by the lighting, and there's a scene where she stares up at the moon, which shows someone's a red eye was staring down at her.
I wasn't quite sure it was a red eye, but you said it was a red eye, so I'll take your word for it. But the moon was going red. To me, I thought it was going more blood red. But maybe it could have been an eye.
Yeah,
a red
I think
eye,
that the wolves were probably making Rosalie the target because making her the next victim or next wolf.
Something along those lines.
But as I said before, this story is mostly focused on getting a woman to become taking a girl and turning her into a woman, even if it's very symbolic and very hard to understand.
Hey, by the way, I found some notes here. Yeah, it was filmed in Shepperton Studios in England, so I'll presume all the country shots were in England somewhere around.
Yeah,
Shepperton
and maybe in the castle was probably. See, there was as I said before, there's a country estate in this movie. We see it a couple of times, and it was probably filmed in England somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, same way Monty Python and the Holy Grail was done, and they really used the scenes really, really good, didn't they?
They used the same estate once in the present and once in the past, with the wealthy family I told you about.
Exactly.
About
that's one thing we didn't mention. Her mum and dad in the real world, at the beginning of the picture, coming home in their car, were in her dream as a mum and dad in her dream state.
Yeah.
Aha.
Yeah.
And the sister too.
Yeah, and as I said before at the beginning of this podcast episode, Rosalie says that she has a tummy bug.
I read it as period pain.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe.
I mean,
Never know.
I've had a mixture of those, and I could never tell if it was a tummy bug or time of the month.
So that's a possibility. So she could have been not feeling well that day and just laying down in bed.
Yeah, and as I said before, if Rosalie is kind of, I think in her mind, trying to figure out how she's going to handle being a woman.
Yeah, probably.
And while, as I often point out, in dreams we kind of feel like we're ready for something, but in reality, are we ever ready?
Nah, not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I often remember in a lot of dreams. I remember having a lot of dreams where I act weird in them, and then in reality, I have the exact same scene, but a different sort of effects happen in the scene. Like it's sort of the dreams often test us on whether we're ready for something or not.
Well, sometimes, actually, a lot of dreams are just your subconscious mind playing out information and stuff and sorting things out.
Yeah.
So if you go to bed and you've got something on your mind, your subconscious mind takes over and can actually sort things out or create images. And I think that's, if she's going to bed and she's thinking about being a woman and changing, that could have prompted the dream.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, there's also the fact that her room, she has a mixture of dolls and stuff, but she also has a mixture of makeup and magazines and stuff, which indicates that
sort of,
which means that she may be trying to figure out where she belongs in when she's a woman.
That's probably right, because when she was laying in bed there not feeling well, I noticed she was made up. She had rouge on her cheeks, a bit too much rouge, and some red lipstick on. So she wouldn't be doing that laying down, but she might have made herself up and then decided to have a lay down.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to be a woman practicing her makeup. Yeah. And then, that could have been,
I also think that if her parents are wealthy people living in a state house and all that, she may be comparing for a coming out party when you think.
Well, maybe not.
Which is a lot of pressure when you think about it.
Yeah, not at her age. I don't think she would have been quite 16. If she's, I don't want to get stuck on things like period stuff, but if she's only starting on periods now, that's normally when you're 12 and 13.
It's just that I noticed that in the room, on her door, there's this fancy formal dress, which could indicate that she's getting ready for a formal occasion, maybe her birthday, or something much more important.
I forgot about the dress hanging on the back of the door. It was a pretty white dress. Yeah, years ago, the females used to do a debut, welcome them into society. Don't do as much anymore. We're in Australia, and see, it's like a coming out party, introducing her to the world.
So she may be going to a coming out party, and it's her own. And you can imagine that would be an added pressure to herself.
Yes, exactly right.
And it's not exactly something pretty when you think about it.
Well, I don't know.
Well,
I've had a coming out party.
Well, I never had one either, but imagine it's a lot of pressure. Like you have to meet people you're probably not familiar with, or you have to dance with a lot of people to make sure that people know make you more feel welcomed in society.
How are you? I'm the man down the road. Doesn't know anybody.
Yeah.
So
So there's a bit of a story with the dress that she's got on her door there.
But actually, she was about the right age for that role too, because she would have been about 13 to 14. There's some speculation out there, they're not quite sure how old she was. Some say she was born in 1970, some say 72, but it's about 13 to 14. And that works into body changing, hormonal changes, getting to the age where she's slowly becoming a woman, maybe this coming out party that you mentioned, that sort of thing, all coming together at the same time. So it would have been very stressful for her. And
that could explain why she's sleeping. She's probably exhausted from trying to make her look so presentable. And
other things.
Even though it's never mentioned at the beginning of the movie, it's indicated that she's feeling rather upset and not feeling, and her parents don't understand what's going through her head.
The mother should have known.
Yeah,
her sister should have known. She was an older sister.
Well, her older sister, she didn't seem to like her very much.
No.
Don't ask me
I'm
why.
glad she got eaten by a wolf in the dream.
I think that in her subconscious, Rosalee was probably pleased that her sister is not appearing in this dream sequence.
Well, she got a little bit of bit. She got chewed up. Actually, that's one thing I noticed too. You know how she had in that sequence where in the beginning of the movie where her sister was being chased by wolves, she had the giant bear and then the other things, whatever.
Yeah.
They were her toys in her room that she brought into her dream.
Cool.
And that the granny figure, she had a grandma doll. I just dawned on me, a little thing there, glass on, a grandma doll type thing with little round glass on, and I think that symbolises the grandmother image in the dream state. Very much, very surrealistic sort of stuff, hey?
Quite. So anyway, guys, there's another scene here that was written in the book but never was in the movie, where Rosalee and the hunter in his human form, they're they're gonna have sex on the granny's bed now that she's no longer there.
But there's a problem, obviously, because the girl playing the role was not of age, and
hint,
they had to rewrite that part of the story probably.
Because of the censors, as I often explain.
Otherwise it wouldn't go past.
Yeah, they probably would have had a hard time getting that past them, and probably avoid the scandal, or worse.
Well, even worse. I mean, the parents wouldn't let it go. Maybe I don't know, but the young girls shouldn't be playing a love scene with an older man.
As I said 2 years ago before, back then. Probably not now. I mean, now I think we're much more. We have better rules in place now. But back then, anything that's with an age restriction on it, we don't allow youngsters in the TV shows or movies to go ahead and have a sex scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of political correctness and right and wrong stuff. I mean, the censorship isn't as bad for adults like it used to be years and years ago. But with kids, they still protect them in the industry, as far as I'm aware. They don't want to be in any compromising situations on or off the films. They are chaperoned, I believe, to protect them. So the industry might be, an unsavoury place at the best. But the kids, I think they do keep an eye on the kids a bit.
Yeah. Even though there was probably a few problems when you think about it. Like with the "Hey Dad" thing.
No, forget that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this movie.
Yeah. So, as I said before, they were very concerned, and way into the scene, they kind of fade out and left it up to your imagination to figure out how they.
The old seagulls in the sky,
which explains why in this scene we don't see Rosalee shed her kid's skin for a wolf skin.
Yeah, it's implied, because the wolf guy, the huntsman, he takes her Red Riding Hood shawl thing off. Excuse me. He takes that off, and it looks like they're going to be doing something. But then they actually change it just a little bit, and then nothing much happens there, and then later on she's a wolf.
Yeah, so, in some of those scenes,
things are implied.
In those scenes where she tries to fight back against the wolf, but at the same time she doesn't want to fight back.
She desires him, and that was the woman part in it saying, "I find him highly attractive, desirable, but he's dangerous. But some females get attracted to dangerous men," and I think that was part of the thing with the grandma and whatever. And,
do you remember the poem way to the end of into the credits?
Well, that was I don't think it was a poem. I think it was a reading out of the original Red Riding Hood or her book, or something or other.
Well, not in this book, but in the original Red Riding Hood story.
Talking about being wary about strangers and stuff. So I actually finished with a reading out of the original story from the Brothers Grimm, was it?
Most likely.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he wrote it. But excuse me, I was tickling my throat again. Hang on. Okay, I'm better now.
Yes. So go ahead with the poem. I think it was.
I can't remember. I didn't try to memorise it. Don't worry, but it did actually mention things about being wary of strange men and whatever.
Yeah, and to beware of whether. I think I remember the end bit obviously where she says, "As you are beautiful, pretty, there shall you be wise. Wolves will lurk in every guise."
Yeah, something.
And remarks that every sweetest kiss or something hides sharpest tooth.
Yeah, some weird, but the point is very realistic sort of writing, which is good though. But talking about imagery and poems and stuff and whatever, that's one thing I noticed in the filming and the sets. I mean, and when I read up on this, they've tried to keep, even though it's a fantasy, they tried to keep the scenery and the props real looking, so it didn't look fantasy. I mean, you don't want a fancy thing like, really over the top. It looked like, an everyday village, everyday people, and all this fancy stuff happening around them without making the whole thing look fantasy.
Yeah.
So it looked like a real village. Might be a little bit compact, but it was a real village with real people going through normal day-to-day routines.
Yeah, a lot like...
It made it feel real.
Yeah, a lot like if you've seen both live action and cartoon version of Beauty and the Beast sort of village.
Yeah, there's a big difference. The live action one, like the one
it was
Emma Watson, was it? That wasn't too bad. They had a lot of good town folk sort of stuff. It looked like a real village. And that's, and without being really weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I did think that. I do think that this movie is pretty incredible, and it's. I guess if you first time watched it, first timer, it gets a little confusing at the beginning, but then you start working it out in your head.
It's worth 2 watches, I think.
It's worth watching it twice and
pick up a little bit.
And pick up on the fact that it's a coming of age story almost.
Well, a little bit like the Labyrinth we mentioned before and other things. And, they've all got these young girls coming of age and addressing different things happening in their minds and in their lives and whatever. And it works good. Now, are you almost finished then? Or?
Yes, I'm ready to rate this movie if you're ready.
Ooh. To me, again, I've said before, I take things as a whole. I don't pick things apart too much. But here we go. I think the filming's good. The sets are good. The storyline's good. The acting's good, especially young Sarah Patterson. Sarah Patterson, I think.
Yeah.
Sarah Patterson. For a young girl who's only about 14 years old, she played the role as a professional, and she carried her part really well. I mean, you'd expect Angela Lansbury to play her part and the other people because they're adults, but I think the wolf guy, that was his first role too, wasn't it?
That was great.
Yeah, the guy who played the wolf, he's got a weird name. I think, not weird, but not strange. Micah Burgess or Burgess, Bergese. I think that was his first lead role as well.
Most likely, yes.
So those guys really carried it quite nicely.
Yeah, he had a good. I think he might be French.
I don't know, if a name like that, it could be French, Belgium, whatever. Now, actually, speaking about Belgium, the wolves. Sorry, just before I forget, they couldn't get a lot of trained wolves. Obviously, that'd be dangerous. So they've got a couple of wolves, some shots, but the rest of them were, I think, Belgian shepherd dogs. And because they look very similar, and they dyed their hair and fur to make it look like wolves, and then they just did some after effects on the eyeballs and make it glow and stuff. But anyway, getting back to the grading, as a whole, I reckon it's got to be up there 8.5 to 9. It's a really good movie. I think it's been underrated. It didn't box office well, but I think it's a case that not everybody likes fantasy. I think it could have done better.
Yeah, well, they just didn't understand it. Period. I mean, this is one movie that does. It has a little bit of weird stuff in it, and if you haven't seen it more than once, then then it's good. It's always good to watch it more than once.
Anyway,
obviously.
What do you grade that, Chubbles?
I think with costumes, sets, actors, I probably would rate this movie 9 out of 10.
Okay, cool.
I know I keep saying 9 out of 10, but with a movie this interesting and good, it's worth watching.
We're going to do a crappy movie soon. And say we get 0 out of 0, 0 out of 10 or something. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Do not watch this movie. No, but anyway.
Yeah, well, it's a little hard to watch a crap.
Well, yeah, but that's not the point. So we watched the 10 minutes of the movie, didn't like it, turned it off. That's really bad. That'd be a really short review.
Yeah, true.
You have to watch the whole movie.
I know. I just don't. I just keep going back to a friend of mine who mentioned a while ago, who told me that. To make a good film review, I have to throw in a few bad ones, and to make people happy, I can poke holes into it and make out that it's horrible.
Well, yeah, but you got to say why it's horrible. You can't say I didn't like it was rubbish. No, you have to say why it was rubbish.
Well, I'm kind of glad that some people like to do it because it gives them a lot of viewers and a lot of interest, but I would love it if people like to listen to reviews about movies that might challenge them and interest them and show them that there is movies out there that are worth watching to see.
Yeah, actually, what we hope to do in the coming weeks, months, whatever, is probably do some really old movies as well.
Well, this isn't old enough for you?
No, old, back in the 50s and 60s, old sci-fi horrors, and maybe go back to an old silent movie occasionally. But we would want to keep it interesting because the young people today don't know these old movies exist because they're not on TV. You won't see them at your local DVD store,
Yeah.
and may not even be online anymore unless you go looking for it. You've got to know the title. So we will, there's a lot of old movies. I think they're classic movies, so we might bring a couple of classic movies which will fit into the genre. And if we find a really, 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 really good movie which doesn't quite fit the genre, we might still do that as well because we think it's interesting and it's worth a look and it's worth a review. So we might stray away from the horror, sci-fi, fantasy occasionally, but most of the time we'll be in that genre.
Yeah, we'll try, guys. I know how you guys like to think outside the box sometimes. And I want to give you guys the chance to see something outside of those three genres.
Oh, and by the way, we might also do the odd review on a director or a producer as well. So because it's something like, we might do something on Alfred Hitchcock or somebody else, or one of the old greats like Cecil B. DeMille or something.
Or the 10 top good, awesome movies to check out.
Yeah, whatever. Things like, we might just break up and make it a bit more interesting instead of just going, here, we've got so-and-so and blah, blah. It's a lovely story. Well, we'll just break it up a little bit and throw some other things in occasionally. So, okay, well, you've graded it and I've graded it, and we say goodbye to the sheepdogs and everybody else, and the wolves are being put to bed. And do you want to sign off?
Yes, I will, Mike. Yes, I will. Thanks for listening to our podcast, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Till then, this is Sarah saying, see you guys next time.
Ah.
Bye.